All right, we are half here. With us from up north is Canadian lawyer, but very, very interested in U.S. politics.
U.S.
David Frei.
law. U.S. law, not the politics is incidental.
Oh, BS. You have so many politics going, it's insane, man.
The funny thing is, it started off with law, and I think it still is law, but it's just that you cannot dissociate the law from the politics these days. It's a intrinsic, intertwined overlap that cannot be undone.
All right, and I got a hero early. John Paxton became a YouTube member.
Booyah.
Thank you, sir.
And the avatar looks like a relaxing Buddha with a leaf behind him.
Yeah, Buddha with glasses, it looks like.
I find the avatar.
Oh, wait a minute. Is that Homer? I'm not sure.
It's too small for me to see. I just like looking at the avatars when I can see them. Welcome.
All right. We're waiting for the other half to show up. So what has been happening with you? You've been dumping a bunch of videos. You're probably trying to sneak and edit one right now.
I started the day saying I was going to take the day off because I'm just tired. But then I read this PolitiFact fact check on a Trump statement that Joe Biden is in his basement, and they actually rated it false. And then I read the fact check, and I actually went into their sources because, you believe it or not, they have sources to confirm that fact check. And then I said I have to do it, and I went to the car, shot the vlog, picked up the kids from school, doing some house stuff, and doing this, and then I'm going to get back to it and finish it for this evening.
All right. Did you hear Glenn Greenwald apparently just resigned today?
You told me. Oh, no, actually, I heard it earlier, and then we just discussed it, and I didn't fully appreciate the impact, but it's serious.
Yeah, I mean, he's the co-founder of The Intercept. He's the guy who broke the Snowden material, and from what I understand via the legendary news source Tim Pool, he, I guess, they told him he had to adjust his articles about Biden. He argued against them, saying that, no, I have a contract that says I can write whatever I want, and I co-founded the company, so go figure. And apparently they disagreed, so he resigned. I guess they said he couldn't even publish elsewhere, which is also in his contract.
And that's that. First of all, I was just texting to see where the other two are. They should be arriving shortly. No, that's amazing. It's an amazing thing. What we are actually witnessing right now is I would say maybe it's dramatic, but the awakening to those who are paying attention to the media manipulation in terms of what they cover and what they don't, and the emphasis they put on that which they do cover, and the emphasis on that which they don't. It's the Hunter Biden story is one thing. Twitter censoring it, Facebook censoring it. The simultaneous pushing of this nonsensical fake story with Giuliani. And I feel like I'm using catchwords like fake. The story with Giuliani last week, with his hands down his pants, run all over the mainstream media, simultaneously ignoring the actual, big story of the week. Once you appreciate it, you cannot unsee the tendency.
Yeah, and you just did a video on that too. And the really bad thing is that there's plenty of stuff that people can ping on Giuliani without jumping all over a false narrative. I mean, it was very clearly a setup.
I didn't fully appreciate how bad and how inaccurate the reporting was. I took for granted, based on the description, he wasn't doing anything to himself. I thought he was going to get lucky with a young reporter, and he's an older guy, divorced. There's nothing immoral about it. When I saw the actual scene, it's just lying to your face for a week.
Exactly. And with us, we have the legendary, well-dressed, as usual, Barnes anchoring the corner. How are you doing today?
Hey, good.
All right. And finally to the channel, Nate the lawyer. I've been trying to get you on here for a while, man.
Yes. No, I'm excited to be here, and it's just, it's one of those things where right now, for some reason, it's my busy time. So, but hopefully things are starting to finally calm down. I'm not running around the country like Barnes, but just in my little neck of the woods, it's got so many cases that are going on. I don't know what just happened. It's just like all exploded at one time.
I think that it's because, like, same thing happened in criminal tax. Bunch of cases hit last 2 weeks. I'm guessing it's because they put a lot of stuff off during the pandemic, and for some reason, right before the election, I guess, is when everybody decided to do all their criminal. I don't understand the logic of this. I thought it'd be like, December maybe, but yeah, so it'll be.
Well, yeah, because I have a lot of negotiations that's happening all at once. Everybody wants to get out of all these contracts, so it's all last minute. Just get out the contract, because especially now since the election, and it's weird because I hate saying this publicly, but a lot of the businesses I work with want to get out of these contracts because they think if Trump loses, they're going to lose money on the economy. So everybody's like trying to say, let's stop spending, let's start saving, because Democrats are bad for business. So it's good for me. But it's bad for them.
One question though: are they voting for Trump?
No, I don't know who they. I didn't ask them. I have a couple of my friends who are voting for Trump, who have knows who work for, but most people know.
I don't think so. This worked out well because we've got Nate on the left, Barnes on the right, so to speak, probably leaning that way.
And Dave up north.
Yes. What is it? Tim Pool always says the milk toast fence sitters on the top.
But the funny thing is, first of all, I have been getting calls in law as well, but I'm at the point now where I'm so lucky, like I can just refer them to my go-to referrals, because I never want to see the inside of a courtroom again as a practicing attorney if I can avoid it. But I was talking to some friends I have in the States to see, to the extent they're telling me the truth. It's interesting to see the way people are voting and the way they're thinking internally, even if they don't say who they're voting for. But Robert has been predicting it for a while. I think it's going to be it's going to be a surprise to those who have been thinking it's going to go one way.
All right, so let's go with that. Robert, what do you say? I think I know who you're picking, but who's going to win?
Yeah, I mean, my bet, I put out my map, I think, yesterday. So I think 75% chance of Trump, which is what I've had since late July, pretty much, and by a wide range of metrics. And I think ultimately 320 to 326 electoral votes. I think he outdoes what he did, but I think it's very, very close in the key swing in the 6 states that I think will decide the election. Though he only needs a combination of like 1 or 2 of them, depending on how they break. New Hampshire, Nevada, and then the Rust Belt, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Ohio. I'm not in Ohio. Ohio's safe. Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. But I think I'm hoping at least that I was hopeful of an election night declaration, and now I'm seeing there's some counties that are not even going to start counting until the following day. So it's gonna get interesting. And what some of us predicted about Barrett has come to fruition. Apparently, without her full team, she can't have time to read the briefs, and that's her excuse for not issuing a ruling or deciding on these emergency injunctions. If you buy that, I got a couple of other Federalist Society memberships to sell you.
Ouch.
So that is to say that some of the important decisions, that one of which is supposed to come down this week, Robert, if it does come down, is going to come down with 8 judges and runs the risk of being a split decision.
They've basically decided not to intervene in any of them. So there'll be no decision until after the election. So there may be issues arise post-election, but they did nothing to stop what Pennsylvania and North Carolina were doing, which was to allow ballots to be counted that are received after Election Day. And the whole prediction was they had to rush Barrett through because she was going to be the salvation and savior of Trump. I guarantee you they promised Trump this as part of nominating her. And the very first thing she does, run for cover. So, but by the way, when we talked about it on Sunday, Viva said that's what some of her allies were saying she was going to do. And so predicted it accurately. And the excuses some of the Barrett fans are coming up with are just pitiful. Oh, she couldn't. It wouldn't be proper until she had her whole team and staff and all this other gibberish. Pitiful excuses. But Barrett's going to be, she might be okay in the end. Uncivil probably will be happy with at least half or 2/3 of her decisions. But it's very interesting that the one thing that basically Trump was promised in exchange for nominating her is the one thing she did not do, which was rule in his favor on election lawsuits on the eve of election.
Wasn't that the case with most of his hires and appointees?
Yes. Mitch McConnell has a magical gift for picking people that undermine Trump. You'd almost think it was intentional.
So I speaking of fact checking, because I was reading one of the fact checks today on PolitiFact. One of the other ones they were talking about was Trump had said it's unheard of to count the ballots after the election day. And PolitiFact said it's not unheard of. They count absentee ballots, they count mail-in ballots, and they count the soldiers' ballots, the overseas ballots.
Yeah. Because I know my father and my grandfather, the military, their ballots were always counted after election, especially if they were like off. Like my brother when he was in Afghanistan. He can't come here and cast his vote, so he cast his vote, and it was always counted after election day. As long as they had them, I think that as long as they had them in before election day or postmarked by that day. Is that right, Robert?
Yeah, that's correct. And what's different really is that we've always had some scattered ballots but they usually never matter. So, you usually get 1%, 2%, 3% after. But the reason why most states are able to predict by usually 2, 3 in the morning is when you get a declaration. I think the only time we didn't was 2000. Now, maybe 1960,
yes.
but I'm not going all the way back to then. But I think other than 2000, we've always had a declaration of the winner. Even in close elections like W in 2004 and Obama 2012 and Trump 2016, by 2, 3 in the morning we did because usually they had 95, 97% of the ballots counted, and that's usually the outstanding margin. At least from people I'm talking to that are in the data gathering, data gathering community that are talking to election commissioners. In a lot of states, election commissioners are hitting panic buttons. And it's because for a lot, like if you're in Pennsylvania, some of these states are having vote by mail at a portion they've never dealt with before. So some states completely comfortable with this. Arizona, Florida, early voting in North Carolina, Colorado, Oregon. Yeah, they know how to do this. What everybody's scared of is we're going to get California. And California has a habit. I mean, I don't know if people follow the Democratic primaries. We often didn't know the outcome. If you had a bet on it, you had to wait usually a month after election day to find out who the heck won and by what margin. So the fear is that that's going to be replicated in these states with big early voting where they have no history of counting those ballots. So
what is the margin of early voting now? Like how much more is it than previous years? Like fourfold, fivefold?
Oh, wow. Well, think about this. 1 out of every 3 registered voters has voted already.
Yeah.
That's blowing everything out of the water.
Especially certain states. I mean, so like for Arizona, Florida, North Carolina, Georgia, it's not it's up, but not terribly. But for Texas, it's like I think tenfold higher. So you're getting states that are massively participating in vote by mail. It's not universal; it depends on the state, but that have never done that before. So, in particular, you're asking a whole bunch of election commission workers to deal with that. Like here in Nevada, won't be a problem. They've been doing early voting, 75, 80% of the vote now since 2012, at least.
What do you,
but
Robert,
not in states.
Robert, what do you think about the I was reading some of the blogs about for election security, and they were talking about the Puerto Rico issue in Florida. Now, for those of you who don't know, if you lived in Puerto Rico, you're a Puerto Rican, you're a citizen of the United States citizen.
Sure.
But if your permanent address is in Puerto Rico, you can't vote in federal elections. So remember, yes, you can't vote in federal elections. It's weird, but if your permanent address is because your vote is tied to the state that you live in. Yep. So if someone who lived in Puerto Rico was to move to, let's say, Florida, and that Florida became their permanent residence, or they would permanently move to Florida, they can vote in federal elections. But then if I move to Puerto Rico, I lose my ability to vote in federal election. That's because
what about Guam? Same thing.
Same thing with Guam. You actually don't have the right to vote. If you read Bush v. Gore, actually Scalia mentions it that Americans don't have the fundamental right to vote. But that's a whole other story. So you have Americans like in Puerto Rico who can't vote. But what I mean by the Puerto Rico issue is that there was some rumblings. Is that after Hurricane Maria, a lot of the people in Puerto Rico moved to the mainland to for benefits and stuff like that, and it had mainland addresses in Florida. So now the campaigns are now trying to get those people who are there from Puerto Rico in Florida to vote in for Democrats or for Republicans. So that's what they're saying is the Puerto Rico issue is that people from Puerto Rico who wouldn't generally be able to vote in presidential elections now, because they've changed their residence to Florida, have a huge outcome, because you're talking about 2-3 million people who are in Puerto Rico. So you're talking about 100 to 200,000 people who moved over after the hurricane now have a chance to sway the election. So I don't know if you've guys heard about that, but that's just something interesting that I thought was happening.
Actually, Nate, you brought up something before with uncivil law, I believe. I can't keep track of everything, but it kind of was fascinating. You were stating essentially, as a Democrat, you're saying you're all turning blue. You're all going to be Democrats, and you want to go into that here.
Well, remember in 2000, that very close election, I knew Bush was going to win because soon as they said you got to count absentee ballots, only thing that meant you got to count military ballots back then. And I think Robert can talk about that, about, absentee ballots were military ballots, and military ballots were strongly conservative, strongly Republican. So as soon as that happened in 2000, I think everybody with half a brain knew that Bush was going to win the absentee ballots, right? 90% of them came in for Republicans anyway. So that, so that stretched out for whatever. But if you go back into the history of presidential elections, starting with Clinton 1, Clinton 2, then Bush, the two terms of Bush, 2 terms of Obama, and then 1 term of Trump. Republicans have only won the popular vote once over that time frame since Clinton. So we're talking about almost 30 years. So and that vote margin that they've been losing by has been increasing just 1%, 2%, 3%, and then Trump and get up to 2 million votes. It may just be the Trump effect where you got more people in California, but if you just see the dynamics, the vote share of people who are just voting Republican is shrinking, and the vote share of people who are voting Democrat. So what happens is back in 2010, the Republicans, which were extremely smart to do, they saw the writing on the wall. They saw this limited vote share and started doing the things like heavy redistricting, going into these, they were focused more on the local level. Let's go to state legislatures. Let's go to governorships. Let's control the people who control the votes, people who control the districts. So you still start seeing real heavy redistricting in those southern states to keep control. But if all the models,
I live in Virginia, by the way.
Oh, so you've seen it happen where you go.
Well, I've seen the state turn blue. I mean,
and so that's what you're starting to see now, and that's the trend. Georgia now is starting to, they assume it's starting to turn blue, but it could be 2 things too. If you it all depends on, if you read the left pundits, they're saying we're winning the argument. We got more people voting. If you listen to people on the right, they more or less say that it's not, you're not winning more hearts and minds. It's just, you're winning the game. You're winning the game in the schools. Because if you're sending most of your 90% of your young people to liberal schools, how many liberals are you going to get coming out of there? And that's why you see. I think you see this. What is it called? It's about, if you notice when they talk about the polls, they talk about the white uneducated voters versus the white educated voters, and how the white uneducated voters are heavily conservative, while the white uneducated voters are not. So I think that's what you're starting to see. It's just within the numbers. But I think ultimately, if the numbers are playing out as we see them for the past 30 years, then Trump is going to lose the popular vote this time, and it's going to be. And if this keeps happening, then the Republican brand is just going to. But it happens, and I want to make it very clear. This happens every generation, where you'll have like the Democrats can hold it for a whole bunch of years, then the Republicans will come and hold it for a whole bunch of years. The Reagan, obviously Reagan for 12 years.
Reagan Democrats.
Yeah. So you have this turn all the time, but now everybody's predicting this turn to the blue, and then you'll have obviously back the turn to the red.
So Barnes, from underwater, what would you say?
What do you mean in terms of?
No, your camera looks like you're underwater. This whole time.
Yeah, and by underwater, he just means it looks.
Yeah, I mean you mean in terms of the refocus, or what's going on?
Yeah.
No, I think the internet's got to be bandwidth on Barnes.
Yeah, you got to turn your bandwidth down probably.
Barnes, Robert, what you made the predictions now, but I look, I don't know if I've been spending too much time following you, Robert, on Twitter. I have a feeling we're going to see a shift maybe in the popular vote. I don't know that it can change overall just because of New York and California in and of themselves seem determinate in who gets the popular vote, unless California goes red, which the odds were, what was it, 11 to 1. One place that I was looking that California got Republican. But
can I mention one thing to you, Viva?
Oh yeah.
There's almost they believe there's going to be 1 million people leave New York, the state of New York, over the next year. Where do you think those people are going? Those people are going to red states.
Yeah, it's look. I know the memes that I read online about the Californians leaving California to go to Texas, and then bringing in the policy to Texas that they just fled from in California.
I'm
But,
from Arizona, dude. I know they do. Trust me.
No, it's an amazing thing. But I mean, so Robert, I mean, your prediction on the popular vote. I think obviously no one can predict that. Few people are predicting that the Republicans are going to get the popular vote. Do you see it going up or down in terms of the margin of the difference?
I think that's going to be very close. So I've told people that there's like you can bet between 0 and 2 points either way. And so I think my popular vote prediction last week was 73 million, and then about 4 to 5 million scattered across write-ins and third parties. So basically about even. I wouldn't surprise me if Biden won by 1 or 2 million. Wouldn't surprise me if Trump won by 1 million. But that's basically where I'm at right now, largely because I think we're about to see the lowest African-American share of the presidential vote, national vote, since 1980. If things like what's happening in North Carolina, which traditionally their early vote share has been a trend, particularly millennials, younger African-American voter, and men especially. So, if you say, let's say you have an African-American male under the age of 50 who's working, who is unaffiliated, doesn't register as a Democrat, doesn't self-identify as a Democrat. That voter is either not voting or Trump is getting like 20 to 25% of the vote that is. So, because of that, it may be the case California, New York, and Illinois really, because of mail-in balloting, creates this huge voter surge amongst groups that otherwise were low propensity voters. And you have ballot harvesting in California and some of it in other states. So maybe that will, where people go door to door and gather ballots, and that might increase turnout. But at least so far, in literally every state that has substantial early voting, the Democrats have underperformed their projected share from the polls. And especially,
I thought that was their huge advantage.
It was supposed to be. It was supposed to sub in for lack of enthusiasm. This is what happens when you nominate duds. I mean, I've been, if I'd been advising the Democratic Party, I was like, look, you just can't substitute for natural enthusiasm. Just like, you can have all the Obama hatred you wanted amongst Republicans. It wasn't going to matter. Nobody was going to get to vote for Mitt Romney. Guy has an elevator for his car. So, it wasn't happening. Same thing with Kerry in 2004 on the Democratic side. Same with Dole in 1996. Same with Walter Mondale in 1984, with the exception that there was a massive voter registration surge amongst African-American voters in 84 due to Jesse Jackson's campaign. So people forget, like, massive African-American turnout in 1964, drops off in 68, drops off in 72, and frankly doesn't really recover until Jesse Jackson ran for president. Massive registration surge, helped the Democrats take back the Senate in 1986. Helped them again in 88, and then it stayed decent. Well, it was with most of the rest of the country, usually 5-6 points behind white turnout. But under Obama, of course, it was even in 08 to white turnout, and then better than white turnout in 2012. It fell. People who thought on the Democratic side that Hillary Clinton was going to get Obama's vote was just nuts.
I don't know how people thought that. There's really people out there who thought that she was going to get Obama's. They forgot that she was the one who helped sponsor the crime bill. I'm like, nobody was out there enthusiastic for Hillary Clinton. I don't know why.
What I don't get are the same people who said that didn't like her themselves.
Yeah.
Nobody really liked her that I know of.
No, but Eric, I mean,
older Democratic women over 50 loved Hillary. That's the only caveat.
But read. I'm just reading Renovacio. He says, how can people look at the insanity of identity politics now coming from the left, the racism, sexism, systemic discrimination, etc., and still think if you are a liberal of voting, this is what I'm realizing, because I'm talking to people who voted for Biden already, and then first discussion I always have is, so where are you at in terms of knowledge of what's going on in the news? And then I find out that they're not at the level of even appreciating what was in the laptop, let alone discussing it. But they're not on the same level of information. But they ultimately say to me, it wouldn't even change to me if I knew that. I would have still voted Biden. And this is where I think everyone thinks
we live in the.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Viva.
The board is set.
No, I'm saying most people are one issue voters, though, right? Most people
Sure.
aren't voting on no matter what that laptop could have said anything. Millions of people are going to still vote for Biden. You know,
the
what I'm
election's
saying?
about Trump. You're either for him or you hate him.
Yes.
Well, especially in such a partisan era. So I think independent of Trump, I mean, since 2004, great book for people, The Big Sort. It's a behavior panel kind of book, in the sense of mindset, mentality, and approach. Scott Adams kind of book that goes through that. Identity. Well, this was true, by the way, from the 1870s, 1880s through early 1900s. People's identity was tied to their political party, and that's
Blue
usually
dog, yellow dog Democrats.
absolutely, and it was just who you were. And we're back to that era amongst large groups of voters. So that's why when they're talking about Biden plus 8, 9, 10, Barack Obama, the most popular, at least media popular candidate to ever run for the presidency, arguably since John Kennedy in 1960, running against a party that was battling a economic downturn, a Wall Street scandal, a collapse war, and a war scandal with the lowest approval of any non-resigned incumbent presidency in American history, managed to only win by 8 points. So when Barack Obama can only win by 8 points running against that Republican Party in 2008, Biden is not exceeding that, folks. We live in an era where it's going to stay within 5-6 points and no matter what. Like it has pretty much since 1992, but it really went hardcore in 2004. The people that are hardcore Democrats are not voting Republican. The hardcore Republicans, despite what some polls are showing, ain't voting Democrat. And the independents lean heavily. Your pure independents are about 10 to 12% of the electorate, and which way they vote tends to shape the election in swing states. And so and polling them is not that effective these days because most of them don't want to answer the poll.
Well,
most independents say they're independent because they just don't want to answer to either side.
Yeah, and they don't want to.
They have their feelings, but
if you're a 45-year-old truck driver, the only way you're going to get him to answer the poll is if you offer him free truck stop topless cards or something. You know what I mean? I mean, otherwise he's not. He's like, what the heck? No.
Well, I was talking with people who are into the mainstream news. It's going to be a landslide. He's going to get 320 electoral votes. He's going to win.
Send me their contact points for a potential wager.
I'm sitting there thinking, like, people don't even appreciate how fundamentally not skewed, but unreliable these idiotic polls are in terms of their sample field, the number of people. I mean, you get a better feel for polling on Twitter because you're getting 50,000 or 100,000 people and not 1,100 people that you're phoning in an afternoon who may or may not be on it.
Those are self-selected people. I mean, Twitter's terrible on that because there's only a certain mindset who's on Twitter to begin with. That would be my big worry.
That's basically true about public opinion polls too. I think they took a big gamble, and if they're wrong, I don't think they'll ever recover their credibility again. Maybe. I mean,
hold on. So I don't know, guys. Don't get me wrong. I was all in with Hillary. I was like, she's going to win. I was convinced.
Oh, you liked her?
Now, no, not liked her. What I'm saying is, I was all in with the whole what was it called? With the whole Hillary's going to win, the coronation. She's going, it's easy until the votes came in. I was like, oh shit, guess what? She didn't win. But this time, I'm not sure. I think Trump has to win. Michigan, can he win the Rust Belt again? I don't know. I don't know. I think it's going to be closer than what most people are saying. But if you ask me to bet, I think I got 100 on Biden. Even though I think Biden's a horrible candidate, I don't know. I think I got.
But would you take any of the forecasters' odds? Because they're saying 92%, 97%.
But then how do you forecast that? Because if he wins, then I can't say, see, they were right 90%.
Oh, I mean, like in the odds the way that would be is you would bet $97 to win $3. That's an effect, and they're saying if it's anywhere over, if it's anywhere less than $85, every single election forecaster is saying bet Biden, and that's where it is in all the betting markets.
I would take that bet. I would take that bet. In other words, I would bet against that because I don't think.
Exactly. And I think that's where the polls, even if Biden ends up winning, It's going to be nowhere near these margins that they're predicting. 12 points, 14.
Yeah, you know what, Robert? If Biden wins, they're all going to be vindicated anyhow. Nobody's going to give a sweet bugger all about the numbers. I just think,
what if Biden won electorally? That would be an interesting turnout, and Trump won the popular.
That would be crazy. That would be crazy. Yeah,
there'll be some gamblers that care. Well, maybe I don't think he's on enough ballots. But the greatest shock. When someone's asking, what would be the most shocking outcome of 2020? We wake up and Kanye's president.
So what does that mean? By the way, which ballots is he not on, and which ballots is he on? Is he not on all of them throughout the country, or is he not going to be a factor?
A bunch of them kicked him off. So America will once again have fewer people on enough state ballots to be elected president than Russia and Iran offers their candidate, their party. I mean, it's a sad fact about the state of ballot access in America. And it was Dear Justice Roberts who said, "Oh, no, we shouldn't be interfering. These judges shouldn't be interfering with the election to allow these people to do things like get on the ballot." And then all of a sudden he was like, "Well, it's totally okay to just make rules up at the end for how you count ballots." So that shows you what kind of establishment fraud Roberts is.
Okay, I got to get this super chat in because I'm not like you guys. I'm not super cool, and these are a rarity for me. How worried are you about Trump's chances in Florida and Arizona? Also, there's definitely fraud going on. I know someone whose wife received a ballot despite being a green card holder.
Well, I think about elections the way I think about SEC recruiting. If you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. So but putting that aside, I personally think Arizona actually may end up being closer than Florida. Florida's a state where they have a lot of early voters. There's a bunch of Democratic folks who track ballots there. One of them got an argument with me about counting ballots on election day, which is like, it's okay to get an argument with me, but why do they always have to resort to personal shots? They always come at it's like they come, especially to come after me legally. It's like, okay, you at least read my resume before you try that route. But but even they are agitated because it's looking really bad. Two things happening in Florida. One, Democrats did not get the young early vote they expected. Going back to Nate's point about Puerto Ricans, a bunch of them were ticked off because some of them had registered to vote in Florida and then found out they have to pay federal income tax now, which you never have to do in Puerto Rico. Like, what? Hold on a second. They lied to us. We don't want to register to vote. We don't want to pay no tax. Screw that. But the number, that's the first issue. Very low African-American turnout so far, particularly under 40 groups. There's a reason why guys like 50 Cent and other rappers are willing, guys like John Sally on Vlad's show, are willing to, a recent African-American prominent city councilman up in Flint came out and endorsed Trump today. They're not taking that chance because they're not hearing or seeing something in their local community. But
is that legit, or is that just like the typical stunt? Obviously anybody who goes against the grain is maybe trotted out. Is this unusual?
Dead. If you're wrong, you're politically dead. So you're finished. So it's someone that now it's very rare. You almost never saw it happen for a Republican before. And there's reasons for that. Your political power for your local community depends on certain things. So but the second problem in Florida is massive shift amongst Cuban voters back towards Trump. So there's been it's one place where immigration has hurt Democrats. So what Nate was talking about earlier, that generally immigration is, because of immigration, you're seeing more and more of the popular vote go Democratic. But Florida is one state where immigration has been. They thought the Puerto Rican immigration would offset the Latin American and Central and Caribbean, and it hasn't. The Venezuelans are massively.
What was the evolution in Florida? It started off as a bigger margin, Democrat to Republican. Now, the last I saw, I think, unless it was just the one poll, it was like 49-48 or 50-47.
Florida's always been swing.
Yeah, the voter registration has shrunk to the smallest Democratic edge in Florida history, and it's driving two different things. Working class whites have been just trending Republican, and particularly in the northern part of the state. And they started shifting their voter registration to reflect that, which they hadn't in the past. And that was part of the Democratic explanation was, don't worry about it. It's people have been voting Republican at a presidential level anyway. But the bigger problem was Republican voter registration trends amongst Hispanics in Miami. Miami-Dade. So, and then in
But
the
let's-
early vote looks like they're going to have a smaller lead going into election day than they did in 2016. And the problem with that is there's more Republicans, at least according to the polls, in Florida saying they're waiting until election day than did in 2016. That's why the early vote people, even on the Democratic side, they're nervous and they're hoping there's a secret Democratic vote that didn't get picked up in the polls that's going to show up on election day, despite saying they weren't going to vote on election day, because that's the hope on the Democratic side. Still possible. I mostly rely on historical metrics, and all those historical metrics say Trump, and that's why I'm betting Trump. And
well, how are they so wrong though? I mean, I do kind of wonder that. Now I know that the polls were technically wrong last time, but they weren't necessarily wrong if you count a popular vote, right? They kind of settled out in the end on that, but the electoral screwed that up.
I think that was a fake narrative. I think that was a total fake narrative from day one, because I tracked those polls in detail because it was the only data point to my theories, and so I dug into them extensively, dug into their history. Reality was, before the James Comey letter, Hillary had about a double-digit lead, and I think the Comey letter created a non-response bias problem for Hillary. So it's what led the lead to drop to 4-5, but in the national polls. But they never changed the statewide polls. They still have the statewide polls with a comparable lead. And also they heard it at the end. They do this all the time. And the way you know this is you'll have all of the four major media outlets, CNN, CBS, ABC, NBC, will all come up with almost the exact same number. But if you look at their internals, which is the different demographic, they'll be all over the place and contradictory to one another. So it's like, how in the world did you all magically finish at Hillary +4, but you don't agree on the black vote share, you don't agree on the Hispanic vote share, you don't agree on the non-college white vote share, you don't agree on how 18 to 29-year-olds are going to vote versus 65 plus? It's just not likely to. This may expose the polling industry worse than ever, the outcome of this election.
One thing that did shock me is that Trump got a larger share of both the black and Hispanic vote than Romney.
Much higher.
But I don't understand how if everything that we've been told through the media is true, that Trump's a racist, how would he get the higher share of the vote? It just doesn't make any sense. But I think the narrative is being played out, because the media does that. It just plays a narrative and it tries to keep to that theme. And I think the more they say it, the more people just start believing it.
I thought that Trump culturally was very well liked in the African-American community, especially the rap community, as an aspirational figure. So that has to carry on. I mean, that's like 20, 30 years old. So, I mean, every range in that community.
We all love Trump. Listen, I'm from New York. We love Trump. Trump card. I don't know if these guys know about Trump card, Trump Tower. Trump was like the boss. If you were a rapper in the street, you was like, you Trump, because Trump had all the money. Trump was that aspirational piece. So right. It's interesting, because if I was ever interviewing Trump, I would say, how does it feel to go from one of the most loved celebrities in the black community to overnight becoming president and becoming one of the most? Why do you think Jim Brown, when Trump became president, Jim Brown, it was all of the black community was going up there to visit him, and people were like, he was like, that's Donald Trump. What are you talking about? He's not. I have pictures of Trump with Al Sharpton giving money to the National Action Network. It's almost insane how and I think that's why Trump, even though his share was
a Democrat, for God's sake.
Yeah, but his vote share of the black community was larger than Romney, because Romney was somebody nobody knew. Trump is someone everyone knows, especially in these urban areas. So it just is what it is.
It was the power of class and a little bit gender. If you were if you were a working class man over the age of 45, you trended towards Trump, no matter your race, ethnicity, or region. That was the incredible thing. And it was like, usually your working class, say border state Southerner, might vote differently than your working, particularly in 2012, than your working class Northern Michigan person.
Trump's got a blue collar vibe about him, though, that's very unusual for somebody of that community.
He's crafted that.
I just went to look up what award it was. It was the Ellis Island Award that Trump won, and I got to PolitiFact, and it says
it's false now.
Donald Trump won the Ellis Island Award for patriotism, tolerance, brotherhood, and diversity alongside, and they rate it as false. And they say if your time is short, he won the Ellis Island Award in 1986 for professional contributions that benefited New York City as a real estate developer and for his German heritage. Okay. Trump was the funny thing is I could say this as someone who neither loved nor hated nor even knew really of Trump until the election. He was never a racist until he ran for the president. The counter argument that everybody's going to say is he never said the things about Mexicans, about border, about immigration that he said until he started running for president. The flip side to that,
anti-Semite too, David.
Oh yeah, he's an anti-Semite.
I mean, with his daughter converting to Judaism and his son-in-law, he's a raving anti-Semite.
It's and a white nationalist. I kept on reading about who was it? Stephen Miller in the White House that everybody's saying was a white nationalist or helped concoct his white nationalist agenda. Guy's also Jewish. But all of this is just part of the war. I don't think anybody actually believes it, except for the people who have been convinced to believe it because they had not as much information to begin with and were more susceptible to misinformation.
Or when you hate a guy, you believe everything bad about him. So
Sure.
like Obama, they believe every crazy bad on the right, every crazy bad thing about him.
Mm-hmm.
It's a consistent pattern. It really goes all the way back. That's why I predicted Russiagate before it happened. I told people, look, there's always a conspiracy theory why the other guy won. We've had that for quite a while now, since we've ever had close elections. Heck, the theory about Reagan was he stole it with the CIA because they postponed.
Hostages. Yeah.
Yep. And then with Poppy Bush, it was all of his CIA ties and bogus reasons. And then with Clinton, it was his illicit tie. I mean, so everybody, the Russiagate was just had an overlay of deep state opposition because they have what you call national security state, call it whatever you want, who have strong opposition to Putin and didn't like Trump's position on it. And everybody likes a conspiracy theory as to why the other guy won because of the cognitive dissonance it triggers. When someone you don't want to win wins, you believe, well, the whole country can't disagree with me. That can't be the reason. They must have stolen it. And that's why, it's always when the other side wins, they stole it. It's never when yours.
I think it's worse now, though, because honestly, even most Republicans thought that Hillary was going to win, too. I mean, that was a pretty much foregone conclusion to 90% of the population.
I knew that Trump was going to win. I could have bet on the markets because they were available at the time. They had like 90 some odd percent that she was going to win. The day I was like, this is nuts. I said it would have been a 50-50 bet in the ordinary run of things, but I didn't have the guts, not because I believed in it in the person. I just knew it didn't make sense what they were saying. And you know what? I got to say, I feel the same way now. And I don't care what the media is saying. I see the way the people who are just picking up the high level news and don't delve into it. I see what they think. I see how they can be convinced. I can see how that backfires and that Hillary's going to win. Not Hillary. Joe's going to win. It's going to be a landslide. But when you talk to people who don't talk, you really get the feel, I think, of a lot of people, the way they're actually feeling. And it's the amazing thing. Yes, it's a bit of an echo chamber in that I know the majority of my viewers on YouTube are consider themselves conservative. Those who don't consider themselves conservative consider themselves libertarian. Very few consider themselves liberal. But when you talk to hundreds of thousands of people who would not otherwise talk, you do get a feel for that which nobody's going to report on. And I feel the same way this year that I did in 2016. And it's not a question of preference. It's just a question of sampling and seeing what people are thinking.
I have to ask you a question about that too, though. Your channel and your audience and the number of conservatives. And I'm very curious about Nate. Is the polarity of your channel shifting with the video you had that took off?
Well, yeah. My channel is now, if you look at the comment section, it's just total all-out war on both sides. Because I had a very liberal channel, and then they went very conservative. And the liberals, but I think it's a good thing. The reason why is the videos I do, I try to make them so precise on the law that you can't argue it. You don't even know what
you're not even stepping in. That's what I love.
I don't even have an opinion. But people are arguing with me about the facts. Like, you said this, and I'm like, no, I didn't say that. The Attorney General said that, or the newspaper, or the witness said it. I played the witness. The witness said it. So, but what it does though, it allows me to have conversations with people without the political veil in front of them. So in other words, here are the facts. What do you feel about the facts? And when people just look at the facts dispassionately, we all really come to the same conclusion. Like when people look at that Breonna Taylor video, right or left, and they look at the facts, they came to a different conclusion than what the media was telling them. And that's what I think. I don't think we're too far apart in our thinking. I think we're too far apart in the propaganda that we consume. And when someone's telling you something is wrong, you're going to believe it until somebody, and it's hard to convince you otherwise.
You know what, Nate? I think you're going to realize that the majority of the people who even have that tendency to come to a channel like yours and explore the facts of, I call it objectively, everyone call it what they want. You're going to notice a tendency of that mental framework. And it's not the people who are watching CNN. It's not the people who are watching MSNBC. And you're going to notice a shift sort of not in the ideology, but in the base. The last time I did the test, an informal poll was about a year ago. My channel, I think there were thousands of people who responded. 65% said they were conservative. 15% said they were centrist. 5% said they were liberal. And then a bunch of others got upset because I didn't include libertarian as an option.
Oh, they shouldn't be counted. They're a pain in the ass.
I'll learn for the next time. I meant to go 3, like right, center, left, and that's it. Just where does libertarian even fit on the spectrum? I don't know.
They don't. They can't even get along with each other.
Yeah,
If you want to avoid women, go to a libertarian conference.
There's very legitimate libertarian philosophy.
Oh, I totally agree.
But I think everything just gets characterized and reduced. It gets boiled down to an absolute, a syrup from a liquid. But no,
But it's tough. Like for me personally, everybody on my channel knows I'm a left. I vote left, but I can't even say that because I voted for Giuliani. You know what I'm saying? So I mixed it up.
Don't say that out loud now.
It's true. He was a good mayor. What can I say? He was a good mayor. And when you're in law enforcement, you're voting more right than left. Like I was in law enforcement, so the people who took care of us were the people on the right.
So how about De Blasio?
No. That's not happening. I would rather not vote than vote for De Blasio. But what I mean to say this is that if you're in law enforcement or you're in the army or you're in one of these jobs,
sure,
generally you're going to be more right than left. And I actually feel that if I had to vote for a candidate, I would rather vote for a right-leaning candidate than a left-leaning candidate. I'll say that all day because I do believe the left likes to play with our emotions, and I don't want to throw away my vote. And I feel that that's what happens in the Black community. I think the Black community for the past 30 years have been throwing away their vote, 80%, 90%, 90% for the Democrats. And then what happens is that they ask for your vote in election time, and then for the 4 years in between that, they don't come talk to you. There's no problem. Like think about this. Obama got the largest chunk of Black votes those 2 terms. He didn't do he didn't do the one thing that all African Americans in this country wanted was to overturn that crime bill, right? Criminal justice reform. That would have been the one thing that would have helped many Black Americans, right? Because the crack cocaine distinction, we all know about it, but he did nothing. It took Trump to do something for that, right? Trump came in and Trump was
which is irony.
So I like right now, the person, and it's funny because we usually have these talks now with me and some of the guys, and we were talking about who's done the most for the Black community, and everybody's like, no, it's Trump is so horrible, Trump is a racist, Trump is this. Say, well, who did criminal justice reform? Where was the lowest Black unemployment in the history of this country? If you just lay them out, it's Trump is like on top of everything.
But this is the thing. You're never going to win that argument because what you're going to it's confirmation bias, and you can have the argument if they believe Trump is a racist, they're going to say the economy he inherited from Obama, the people he pardoned, their token pardons so that he can claim not to be a racist because that's what a racist does. So you'll never change the mind of people on both ends of the extreme of the camps. And so these arguments will not go anywhere except for the people who are not already, dead set in their ways to begin with. But
who created the EPA?
Oh, say that again.
Who created the EPA?
Richard Nixon.
Yep. And who passed the crime bill? Clinton.
Clinton.
Who's rejecting the crime? So ironically, a lot of times you're seeing the left and the right. A Republican president can pass a populist measure because they have cover.
Yes.
A Democrat can pass a crime bill because they have cover. It seems like the opposite party quite often actually moves the needle one way or another. Or is that a false observation?
No, it's very true. In fact, I used to argue with people, if you're pro-life, vote Democrat, because abortions tend to go down more under Democrats. And the reason for that is because they provide more material support for young women, so they have an alternative. On the other hand, I mean, that's why Obama was the deporter in chief. Obama deported far more people than Trump has.
Oh,
most
good
people,
example.
most people don't know. Most people don't even.
And
don't even know
droner
that's
in
a
chief.
fact. Most people don't even know that's a fact. If you
But-
tell that to people, they'll say you're lying to you. I've told that to people, and people told me I'm lying to their face. I had to show them. No, that's true. He deported more people than Trump ever has.
And if you're anti-war, always vote Republican. And the reason is this: nobody will ever trust a Republican that goes to war. Probably for greed, probably for some corruption. Democrats always go to war for apple pie, for women, and for children, and refugees, and all that crap. So they come up with much more. The deep state can sell a war if a Democrat is president. They can't if a Republican is president.
And that was an amazing thing that I noticed in the debate. Is like I'm watching the debate. I have no dog in the race, no skin in the game. I hear Biden faulting Trump for getting along, so to speak, with China, with Russia, and I'm thinking like, North Korea, Iran. I'm like, okay, so that's great. So what you want basically is someone to start a war with nuclear superpowers, as opposed to a trade war, which fights a little bit differently and which negotiates a little bit differently. And it's an amazing thing. I think this is the first time in how long that there has been no new wars started.
It was a massive tactical mistake by Biden, because he lost the Norwegian vote that night, and that's going to kill him in Wisconsin and Minnesota. If he loses those two states, those statements kill him. And all to get what? One more Washington, D.C. Bill Kristol voter in Northern Virginia? Congratulations.
But don't forget the wars. War is a money driver.
Rain.
It's a money driver. People, those things that they were doing with South Korea, the war games. That there were whole industries built on the funds that the military being there, the equipment and all that stuff. So Trump stopping that also hurt that that industrial complex for the military, because the war is big business, and Trump has been pulling us out of a lot of these conflicts. So and that saves money, but at the end of the day, Biden is going to do what's going to make those handlers happy, and getting into these conflicts, getting into these proxy wars is a money making scheme.
Well, so Wellman says war is a money driver. No, well, it's a money driver for the military industrial complex, the people who are contracting the weapons out. It's a money.
By the way, are in every state, which is very helpful, because any senator that wants to vote against any particular BS project, like, we do not need tanks, guys. Okay. And by the way, I live in the Virginia Beach. Newport News is the next door city. We have all the the carriers, aircraft. We don't need any more. We're good. We are very, very good, but if we say no, how many jobs are we going to lose in the area?
I was going to say the voters there would disagree with you.
Of course. And
too many aircraft carriers. There's no such thing as too many tanks. Let's drive them to school, use them as a SWAT backup plane. Everything else. That's part of the reason for the militarization of police.
Yeah.
It was the money to be made by the military contractors.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
For
you're selling it wholesale now. Here, yeah.
Fear sells.
That never turns out good. You give some small town like Red Bank. I always make fun of Red Bank. It's in my hometown, Chattanooga. They had a SWAT team. The place was tiny. It's like, you don't need a SWAT team. What do you have a SWAT team for? What's going to happen is they're going to come up with an excuse to use that SWAT team. Of course, they did. They ended up controversy, had ultimately disbanded the SWAT team because they got these guys all jacked up that never get to do anything. Really, probably like that cop at the Breonna Taylor scene that was all jacked up. They should have got him out of that scene. The cops were there saying there's something wrong with this guy. He's way too jacked, and he's the one who just started firing like a wild man. By the way, Nick, you were right. He was shooting at his own police officers.
Yeah. They think he might have been the one that shot the other cop, because he had a 9mm on him too. But it's inclusive. But one thing I found out about the. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Somebody was saying something. I was going to find. There's some fascinating. information I just found out about the Breonna Taylor. So I was watching the cops interview, and he said something that piqued my interest because I was a ADA. So question witnesses all the time. So especially when I've written many warrants, and I've gone on executing a couple of warrants. Now, one of the interesting things about executing just for the audience, when you execute a warrant, the first thing you do is usually it's in the daytime. It's this whole late at night cloaking that don't happen. Usually it's in the daytime. Somebody comes and knocks on your door. You think it's a delivery. And if you crack the door open a little bit, we bust in and then we announce. So we don't, police open up. We don't do that. We knock on the door. As soon as you open it up, we bust in. Police, search warrant, right? That's the way it usually works because it's the element of surprise. Sometimes you'll knock on the door and somebody will say, who is it? And then you'll say, police. And they'll be like, police, what do you want? Now it's search warrant. And you got to get the ram ready to bust that thing open because now that you've announced, you don't want them destroying evidence. So as soon as you say police, so in the Breonna Taylor, when people knock, when the cops knock, they don't announce normally. And that's what he said. He said, we first that we knocked, we didn't announce. But the media has been telling you guys, has been telling everybody that there are 11 witnesses that did not hear the police announce. Haven't you guys have all heard that, right?
Yeah.
Every one of you. 11 witnesses, there's only been one witness that heard the police announce. But now I'm here to tell you, those witnesses didn't hear anything. They didn't hear a knock. They heard nothing. And what happens is the only thing they heard was the gunshots. And the media was so dishonest with this that they said, oh, the witnesses, no witness heard them announce except for one witness. Now, the one witness that heard them announce was actually outside. And the cops, when they ran up to the door, he was standing outside. So they said, go inside. And they started begging. And that's why he heard them announce. But none of the other witnesses heard anything. So when they asked the witnesses, did you hear the police knock? They didn't hear them knock. When you hear the police announce, they didn't hear them announce. What did you hear? They heard the gunshots. But the media is going around telling everybody that there are 11
What time of day was it?
that did not hear the police announce. That
It was midnight.
It was late. I mean, nobody hears anything that late.
Yes, nobody heard anything. But the thing is that the story that you've been heard, that you've been fed, the story that you've been fed is that 11 witnesses, the way the media's played it, they heard the police knock, but they didn't hear them announce. That's not true. They didn't hear anything. They heard the same thing as witnesses 100 miles, as the same thing I heard. They heard nothing. That's why the AG didn't bring them in to the thing. Now, the reason why they paid those $12 million is because, and I'm just going to be straight up, is that because of the death and because they arrested this guy because of the Castle Doctrine. Castle Doctrine protected him. They arrested him. That's why they treated him the way they did after they took him into the. Nobody shoots a cop and goes to the precinct without handcuffs and free to walk around. They did that because of the Castle Doctrine. They were legally bound to not arrest him, to kind of let him go. So they that's where they paid up all that money. But with this case, it's just come to the fact where the media has been trying to push this narrative about racism. And even Kenneth Walker, because I'm doing an update, even Kenneth Walker said this wasn't about race. This was just about bad police tactics. And that's what you pay for. If you got bad police tactics, you pay. That's what they're paying for. They should have just gone to a full no-knock warrant, bust through the door, not give them a chance, because we all know, any cop that you guys speak to know that if you go through a door, if you knock on that door and give them time to figure out what's going on in the middle of the night, they're going to get a gun. They're going to protect themselves. That's why you go in no knock. But it's a madhouse.
I got to ask you though, Walter Wallace, because you're on both sides of it. You were a cop, and this is a direct reaction situation that's hot in the news. How do you feel about it as a cop?
Well, Walter Wallace, I would have shot that guy. I would have shot him too. He's got a knife. I'm telling him to drop it. I've circled back. I'm backing up, and he's coming at me. You get shot. I'm sorry. It's just what it is.
You didn't think it was racist or anything of this?
How could it be? They were called there for a man with a knife. There's a man here, crazy man with a knife. He's got mental health issues. I was watching The View today, and I couldn't, and I almost smashed my TV because they're like, why don't they just shoot him in the legs? Oh, he has a knife. Why are you bringing a gun to a knife fight? Because we're cops. We're not martyrs. They train us in the academy.
Have you seen Mythbusters on that, actually? Mythbusters did a breakdown that you always should bring a knife to a gunfight. And they did a breakdown, like within a certain distance, a knife will outdo a gun every time. It was kind of shocking.
Yes. But I'm saying this. I've trained police officers, and I've been to trainings. I've been to trainings not only here in New York, I've been to trainings across the country. Everyone unanimously tells you, if someone has a knife, you pull out your gun. No questions asked. Don't pass go. That person has a knife. That person has pepper spray. That person has a taser. Your gun should be out because that person can cause you serious physical injury or even incapacitate you and take your gun. So the thing is, gun comes out with knife, and if somebody comes at you with a knife, you shoot them. That's your net. So this now, if people want to talk about maybe changing police tactics and maybe don't have police shoot people with knives, you can have that conversation. But unanimously, all across, any cop you talk to, tell them if they call you and say somebody has a knife, what's the first thing you do? You show up there with your gun. Period.
No, I've heard the statement also that at close range a knife is more dangerous than a gun. I mean, I know nothing of this from any form of experience. That presumably is exactly why lethal force is required when someone with a knife is approaching a cop. And you've seen examples of how quickly it happens. You've also seen examples of how the individual doesn't respond the way you think they would to being shot in real life under whatever circumstances, and how one bullet to the kneecap, if that's an easy target even to hit, will not incapacitate someone who in the moment is unable to be subdued. Even when you see people getting shot 5 or 6
times. It can be argued if you have enough time to concentrate and hit them in the kneecap, then you shouldn't be firing at all.
Exactly. That's what they tell you in the academy. You shoot center mass to stop the threat. You don't shoot for these because don't forget too. Funny story. This happened in New York. Cops go. It was near the Empire State Building. Cops go. See this guy with a knife. They're trying to be, these super cops. Let's shoot him in the legs. And they shooting at the legs. And guess what happened? They shoot a whole bunch of bystanders behind the guy. Why? Because those cops got down and hit up. And that's why they say you shoot to stop the threat. You put the bullets into the person, and you don't want those bullets coming, and that's why they got hollow points. So the bullets don't go through bodies. They stop right there. You're starting to shoot at legs, you get ricochets, and now you got all these other people shot. It's crazy because I think there's a disconnect between what police are trained to do and what the public thinks police are. The public thinks police are like lethal weapon. They're shooting people. No, that's not how it works. You know how hard it is. You know how hard it is for people to qualify at the range alone. Like I've had cops have to go 2 or 3 times to qualify because they've never held a gun before. You know what I'm saying? Think about this. People on the force who've never held a gun. Now you're training them for the first time to use a weapon. Sometimes they have to go back 2 or 3 times to learn this stuff. So, and then you're putting that person out there to tell them to shoot people in the. It just is not happening. We try to keep it simple, and keeping it simple is if somebody pulls out a knife, you shoot and comes at you. Pulling out a knife is one thing, but come out of the knife and come towards you, you shoot them and then let the jury sort it out.
Right now, if I can change the subject slightly, because I want to ask Robert something that Nate and I were talking about, and it goes to the Colfage Bannon indictment, and who's prosecuting the case against Bannon and Colfage, who's in charge of the SDNY, and what potential politics are underlying this decision. Nate, can I explain what you explained to me, or do you want to explain it to Robert?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Okay. Nate is telling me that it's a Republican Trump appointee who's prosecuting this case against Bannon and Colfage.
That's kind of. In other words, in terms of who approved it. In other words, what's happened is McConnell has not allowed, or that's my interpretation, whatever the reason, Trump has not nominated someone to the SDNY that's been approved. So you've had these temporary, transitory people put in charge who clearly are not running or disciplining SDNY as far as I can tell. And so the current, I think she stepped down, but it was a careerist who was in charge at the time, who is technically in charge. I don't think they're running it. I think the career people at the second level is who's running SDNY. I have other reasons from other cases to know that's the case. So the top is not doing anything at all. And in fact, that was why Barr was upset and tried to move someone in from New Jersey to replace him. And they created a huge storm in the press. And so he backed off of doing that. That guy did resign, who was the temporary head. And they put a careerist in charge. I guess she's now going to resign. But the problem is there is no Trump Senate-approved U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York right now. There's been these temporary people floating in and out. And I find it very. Remember, he got into controversy because he forced Preet Bharara out. Bharara was going to like hang around, which was insane. Bharara was extremely political. The show Billions is based on, in part, heavily based on Preet Bharara, which I hope certain parts of that show are true about Preet Bharara. I'll let people watch the show. You know what I'm talking about. But I do know the part about him being scared of losing is true. I have reason to know that. All you had to do was put a little fear of Jesus in him, and by golly, he wouldn't prosecute you. If he thought he had a 10% chance of losing, he was such a wuss, he wouldn't prosecute. But the line people in SDNY are very anti-Trump, just hate him. And Barr was basically implicitly complaining about that at the Hillsdale speech that I was at with him. Implicitly, that's why he went out of his way to say we can't have one definition of wire fraud in, say, the Southern District of New York, and a different one. There's a reason why I talked about it. So, the line people are. It's kind of like that. Trump technically appointed, kept James Comey on, put Andrew McCabe in, and Christopher Wray in, but they're not. But they all hate Trump. So I'm like Christopher Wray is very good friends with Sally Yates. Sally Yates is corrupt. Eternal Truth #2.
Okay, now when are you going to get that T-shirt?
Yeah, we got to get. Oh, I'm thinking that'd be
Even Barnes.
yeah, it's a good idea. Oh, I thought a good Nate T-shirt would be his line about how did he put it? Cops are this, not a martyr. I was like, that would be a good, like that would probably sell well on merch for you, Nate. At least with part of the audience. But so yeah, I mean, I think it's that's my takeaway on it from dealing with it tangentially. And I've dealt with this SDNY in some other cases. They were planning on bringing a few more very high-profile political cases, backed off at the last minute because they got more blowback than anticipated on the Kofage indictment. They thought that would be a big win, just a big win for them totally. Then it turned out to be.
But I'm assuming though, because I know the way it worked in the DA's offices. That if you had, for instance, when you ever had a press case, that goes upstairs, right? Mm-hmm. If I had got anybody dealing with the mayor, the whoever who knows whoever, that goes upstairs. Those people know about it, and usually they tell you, "Oh, you do what you got to do," but you really know what you got. You know what I'm saying? It's that type.
But
it's the real world.
Berman had recused himself for anything that concerned Trump.
Yeah, but that's what they say. But you kick it up and you let them know this is what we're doing, and you get the weight. But so I'm assuming that you got Trump loyalists, right? With this, we build the wall. You got Trump's former this guy. You got Trump's son who had done a couple of promos for them. You got a lot of the Fox News crew who were doing promos for them. That type of lawsuit, I don't see not getting into the hands of the acting U.S. attorney and him saying, okay, you can go with this. Because sometimes they'll even hold off and say, okay, right now we don't have enough. Let's just wait, keep investigating. And then maybe see till the next guy comes in to take it over. I've seen that happen before. But if Trump's guy, the person that they put in after they kicked out Dorn, they put a new person in. That person, I'm positive. I don't know for a fact, but I'm positive. They got that file because that file is a high-level file. And they okayed it. So if there's a political prosecution, Trump's guy, the person he just put in there, had to, I think, approve them to go after those people because it just doesn't. Like when I was a cop, I couldn't just go and arrest the mayor and it's okay. That has to be some people. And for people out there who don't know, you can't just arrest everybody. Some people's arrest has to be approved. Some people's prosecution has to. Yours doesn't. But if somebody high level, yes, if I'm going to prosecute them, I need to get the okay. And I think that's what happened. And I'm just saying, I believe that's what happened here. Now, if Trump's loyalists did it or didn't do it, I don't know. But it's just hard for me to say it's a political prosecution based on that knowledge that the guy that he just put in there had to approve not only the indictment, but the arrest and the whole, he had to give that the okay. Am I wrong here? Robert?
You're right. That's what almost always happens in state prosecutors' offices. It's not been happening at various levels, depending on the kind of charge or kind of prosecution at the U.S. attorney's level since 2014. So like in tax cases, every single one of those is by law required to be approved by certain people. over half of the tax indictments that I've been connected to or that I know about were not properly approved. It's since 2014, and SDNY, because I've dealt with them in several contexts. They're whatever the line prosecutor runs it. That's the reason why Barr made that whole speech at Hillsdale about all these line prosecutors who think they can just ignore what I say and do what they want and they're independent. That's who he was speaking. It wasn't just SDNY. He's had this problem throughout the entire country. And it's because the professional class as a class really hates Trump, and probably even quote unquote Republican prosecutors on the federal side that are careerists are anti-Trump. And it's really bad in SDNY. There's been some cases that people probably will never hear about, but there have been some cases at SDNY that are really crazy. And here's an example. There's cases that they were supposed to get approvals from other U.S. attorneys because they're going into their jurisdiction and prosecuting them for things that they're a resident of and mostly took place in that other jurisdiction. SDNY is refusing to do it. And somehow, and the only way this happens is it started to a trophy over during middle of Obama's term. The supervisory started getting less and less control of the careerist. And the careerists are like running the shop. I had a tax case that went on 10 years in California, Southern District of New York, Southern District of California, that never got proper approvals up top. And
damn,
I mean, it was just crazy. I had to raise all kinds of hell over it. There were 2 congressional hearings ended up being tangentially related to the case. Forbes featured it in a different context. And it was all because people had they've learned the process. Put it this way, an FBI agent can get away with things that no NYPD cop ever could.
Oh no, never.
They're like, I had an Atlanta case where the IRS agent was just going and getting subpoenas for the grand jury in a case that no one at the U.S. Attorney's Office had approved. Nobody. And she was doing it all on her own. And it was like, how in the world does this happen? It just slowly, it got basically supervisory discipline, which was a problem back in the day, was disciplined in the 80s and 90s, got really slack, starting late under W, and then continued bad under Obama. Some of it was because he couldn't get appointees through after 2010, particularly after 2014 in the Senate. So like the tax division never had a person running. It still doesn't under Trump. They had not an appointed person. So especially if there's something like that, that's where the problem spikes really high. And you have a lot of young judges who don't understand how this protocol is supposed to work because it's never been an issue before. So they're like, what are you talking about? It has to get this approval. Who cares? The grand jury indicted. And it's like, no, there's certain rules here for a reason, but you're fighting an uphill battle. So I think in the state level, you're correct. This would never happen. It's happening badly on a federal level. And I think it's a testament to democracy. The Democratic check on elected branch office makes clear that someone that's running the New York District Attorney's Office, no way he's letting a high-profile case not get approved by him, because that could be blowback on him. But because they're not elected at the U.S. Attorney's level, that's the first thing that opens the door. The second thing is they're not meaningfully enforcing supervisory rules. That's the second thing that opens the door. And then the third thing is a lot of dislike of Trump amongst a lot of federal prosecutors. Much worse than state prosecutors.
So what happens next week? I mean, to put it in the context of back to the election, what happens next week? Because there's so many things up in the air right now, including Sullivan. I guess that'll go on until maybe I don't know, maybe after 8 years it'll be finished.
Yeah, I mean,
what do you guys think?
Well, you got 3 possibilities. First, you got the Q world. The Q world believes that once Trump wins, we'll find out that Obama and Hillary are all locked up in Guantanamo. Justice Roberts will be removed. Lynn Wood will become Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, somehow magically appointed without the Senate process, because Justice Roberts is in on the Epstein scandal. So that's the Q version of what's going to happen in the legal world. Then you have the sort of some of the what I'd call the conspiracy left. Right after the election, the military is going to march Trump out of the White House and maybe send him to Guantanamo. Depending on which Russia. It was like you had one of those conspiracy theorist guy on, and I was listening to him until he started. You were challenging on some stuff, Eric, and when he started repeating some Russiagate stuff, I was like, okay, I can't really listen to you on cue, man. I mean, you got to be able to know what's going on your side of the aisle and say, well, we know he took money. I was like, no, pal, he did. That's why people ended up not liking the guy. He had a great opportunity to expand his audience, failed. But yeah, that kind of crowd. And then what I think, as long as it's not too close, I think you'll have a lot of people debating internally what they missed about the election, is what I would hope. If it's Trump, if it's Biden in a big number, it's what the media expects. They'll probably back off of accelerating against Trump. But if Biden wins, Barr is done, Durham is done, Spygate is done. That goes nowhere. That's over. I don't think some of the Democratic hopes of targeting Trump will continue, but maybe. I mean, you got people out of New York suggesting they will, but I don't think that will happen. The New York District Attorney is stepping down. He's not running for re-election. So I think that it'll just shift to a left direction. Now, I do think Democrats will begin talking about expanding the U.S. Supreme Court. I think there's just too much talk about it. But it'll depend on whether they won the Senate as to whether or not they can try to push that through. And I think there'll be some Democrats that'll be nervous about it in the Senate. But I think they may start with just one seat. Then you have splits, but they'll probably at least, or two would be the more logical. So that would be the next legal controversy.
Isn't that a dumb move, though? I mean, I'm sorry. I always keep looking back to the nuclear option. And it's who gave everybody Barrett? Who gave everybody Kavanaugh?
Well, I have one question though. Speaking of expanding the court, which is the digestible term for packing the court, what limits the amount of people that anyone can expand the court to at any time? So
there's no limit. It's up to the House and the Senate. And I think they'll go across the board. I think they'll look at expanding the number of House seats. They cut a deal in the 1920s to never do that again, but I think they will start talking about it.
Annex DC and Puerto Rico.
DC, statehood for Puerto Rico. That'll be the next agenda to add to the Senate, because they're at a disadvantage in the Senate because of how the profile of states works out. It leans Republican effectively. So I think you'll see political war on that side. I hope they don't go too far if they prevail, because that I think will produce a backlash. If you have a bunch of people who feel really futile and fatalistic about their ability to change things within the democratic process, they go outside the democratic process. So that would not be a good thing. I think it's why the media should have put Antifa in check early. Unleashing that kind of tiger is, as Sam Adams said, be careful if you ride a tiger before the tiger devours you. And I think that, the Tim Pool and other people are saying that would be where things could go. I think, historically, we've usually, resolved things and moved on no matter who wins. I do think there's some on the left that want to use this as an opportunity to seize power across the board. But that I think would backfire if they did.
They're packing the court. That's for sure. That's the reason why they won't answer the question. They will be packing the court. And if they win the Senate, the nuclear option, you were talking about the nuclear option earlier. That was, for those of you who don't know, was Chuck Schumer. Obama, in his last 4 years, wanted to get more federal judges on. The Senate was able to filibuster judges. So what happens is that the Senate, Schumer and the Senate Democrats said, well, we will take away the filibuster for regular judges and leave it for the Supreme Court. And then when McConnell got his shot, he's like, well, listen, we're just not going to do it for any judges. And that's kind of why you have Barrett and everybody who's been pushed through. But I think if you're hoping that they're not going to do this, they feel that they've lost 2 seats. They feel that they've been stolen, and they feel the only way to get it back. And I know the argument's going to be already. We've expanded the Congress, right? We've got more senators and the last time the court was expanded was 200 years ago. So we're adding 2 more seats. Why? Because we need more people on the Supreme Court. That's going to be the argument. Hear me now. I'm going to add 2 seats over the nuclear option because it takes legislation to do it. So they're going to kill the filibuster, add these 2 seats, and to be damned with everything else.
And they'll open. I think they'll open borders.
And then the Republicans, when they win, will pack it themselves.
Yes.
Well, the goal would be
22 justices.
But you're going to need 3, though.
If they open the borders to Central America, they can flip Texas and Arizona. And then they now have a lock-in on the Electoral College.
And there is no, what would it require in order to limit the seats to put on the Supreme Court? Is it a constitutional amendment? Is it a legislative?
Yes, it's Congress's constitutional authority to expand. But but Congress can contract it, but those judges will still be judges. So
Right,
they
they're
can
tenure for
contract
life.
it once. Yeah, and then if you wanted to re-expand it again, like in other words, when the Senate Republicans take over, they can pass legislation to bring it back down to 9. But those 2 judges won't lose they would just be like on a DC circuit or something. And then if you expand the court again, those 2 judges will get right back on the court.
Yes.
And by the way, I noticed in the chat, I had to double check before confirming. The Department of Justice confirms FBI 2019 criminal investigation into Hunter Biden still active. So they confirm the existence of it. There we go. And apparently,
is that ABC News?
This was
Is that ABC?
Yeah, ABC. And apparently,
well, no, that's shocking. It's actually starting to go into the mainstream. I guess they can't keep it out.
But that's like everybody should be kind of scared about that, because the Department of Justice in its history has never confirmed or denied that they're investigating anybody. I don't know where this is coming from. That's a problem.
This is the simulation. This is the replay of 2016. A week before the vote, Comey comes out and says they've reopened the investigation into Hillary. It's mind blowing. It's mind blowing because it's all new to me, and it's crazy the parallels.
The simulation sequel is just off the charts. It's unbelievable. It's
someone else in the chat said Lil Wayne just endorsed Trump. So
that doesn't surprise me. That wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all.
If you know Lil Wayne, I didn't realize his cultural influence until I went to a Mayweather fight and realized, man, everybody's trying to dress and look like Lil Wayne. Now, a lot of them were in the alternative product distribution business, the unsafe sanction business. So that was a little bit different animal. But also, Mayweather is a genius. He got all these people to hate him and spend lots of money to see him beat, and then he wins again, which made them doubly mad, which made them spend more money to see him get beat next time. And that man was a master in the ring. Just
that was the Muhammad Ali. That's what Muhammad Ali used to do.
Oh yeah, say, brilliant, just brilliant.
Hate me as much as they can because everybody wants to be there to see him eventually lose.
What do they call them in wrestling? They have a term for that.
The heels.
The heel. Yeah, he's kind of the heel in boxing, right?
Yeah. But if you're a undefeated heel, it makes it even more because people want to see the next big thing knock you out.
Mm-hmm. That's what McGregor is kind of sagged in popularity a little bit, I think.
Yeah, because they beat him up all the time now, unfortunately.
Well, I've got a couple of super chats.
Go ahead.
Getting here. I don't know what country this is. Per Johannesson SEK 100.
Swedish?
Hopefully,
I think Swedish.
That's awesome. Would love to see Barnes talk with a Pope hat in regards to views on free speech, how the First Amendment should apply in the modern era. P.S. Quite bad on Twitter, but I love his podcast, Make No Law.
Yeah, he became real popular, real famous, and well known, and smart guy who's gone nuts in the Trump era, and has become condescending and arrogant. The thing I hate about law Twitter it's the same thing I hate about the election mafia on Twitter, is their condescending arrogance. They're part of a broader class of people who believe that because they have a credential, that gives them superiority over others. Oh, I'm an expert. I mean, I had Nate Silver today. Oh, I'm an expert, and all these other people are betting they're not real experts. They just think they are.
That's who you hate in general, though, isn't it, Barnes?
Yeah.
Let's be honest. You hate smug people more than anybody.
Absolutely. I hate snobs. I just hate particularly professional class snobs. I just, it reminds me of my Yale days. It was Yaleys and people at Macaulay, the private prep school I got a scholarship to, that taught me to really despise old money, rich Southerners and the professional class today. I just despise both. And I admit, like, I remember someone asked me why I had a certain opinion on something, and I just said it's just pure bias. I just have bias. And not all biases are irrational, though. Sometimes they're morally necessary. But yeah, it's just this contemptuous arrogance where they approach anybody who disagrees with them in such nasty language and vituperative approach. And I just don't respect those people. I'm happy to debate Pope at any time. I think he's, there's aspects of his legal career that are very impressive. And there are aspects of his intellectual approach that are credible. But when he just loses his mind and acts like a spoiled child when it's anybody who disagrees with him on anything Trump related. And he's lucky I didn't sue him because he said some things about the Covington kids that I could have sued him for. I just decided bad idea to sue a lawyer who knows a lot about libel law. So I skipped that. There was other targets, and I was going to have enough opposition already on the cases. But yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to debate him anytime, any play. I said the same thing about Nate Silver. There's an election forecaster out there. I forget her name. But she became popular in 2018, and she was like, "There's no good argument for Trump." And I'm like, "Well, let's discuss it and debate it." I was like, "There's plenty of good arguments for Trump. You don't have to agree with him. I mean, I don't mean on policy. I mean as to why Trump will at least overachieve the public opinion polls." And indeed, every single data point other than the polls actually screams Trump. If we had no polls at all, people just looking at this race, almost every election forecasting model would say Trump. So you can argue why you think that's unimportant, insignificant, not as important as polling, etc. But the left, the problem with these echo chambers, it's worse on the left now than on the right. At times it's been worse on the right, but it's worse on the left now because the right cannot escape the left's perspective because of the dominance of cultural institutions, media, education, entertainment, etc. Whereas if the left wants to ignore the right, it easily can. It can carve them out and not see anything. And that's what Viva was talking about earlier. I run into far more people on the left that have had no clue about certain popular narratives on the right or questions about certain things than I do people on the right. There's actually a political scientist that will do this test for decades now. And some political science professors provide to their students, which is they have someone say, okay, pretend you are of the opposite political opinion of what you are.
Jonathan Haidt, probably.
Yeah, Haidt and others, and predict what you would, and Haidt goes into it, predict what the other side would believe. And in the old days, 80s, the left was better at predicting the right's view than vice versa. Today, it's the flip. Conservatives are better at identifying what a liberal believes than a liberal is of a conservative. And then this is like even my and I see it on my family friend networks. So my friends on the right have a lot more engagement with people on the left than the vice versa. And even people like, well-regarded professors, well-regarded lawyers, my niece, some other people who are very sharp, very smart, who say they love to engage people on the opposite side. I see nobody on their Facebook post ever engage them at all. And usually they get a little agitated if I do.
This is down that line. I want to keep going on though, but could the rioting in Philly suppress the vote? And who is that likely
two things.
to impact?
The idea that any of BLM would increase apparently they just didn't study the history of the Black Panthers. The people who are angry and upset at the system don't suddenly be number one, gangs don't organize people. So gangs haven't been registering people to vote since 1850. So, that quit a long time ago. If you think gang members are going to organize people to vote when they're trying to stay
Is that Tammany Hall days or no?
Yeah. Gangs in New York actually portrays this. I mean, gangs used to be good at actually getting out the vote. And if you look at the historic name of Crips, the Crips are like Committee for Revolutionary, whatever. Now, there's a scammy component to that. They're like, oh man, look at the Black Panthers. We'll just rename our gang a political organization and voila. We're just engaging in political activity here. Knock on the door. You got to make a little contribution, my friend. But they just, when the Black Panthers were at their peak, Black turnout started to go down, not up. It's only in the liberal media's mind that this generates political activity. It tends to generate actual opposition to the system entirely, and a belief that the system itself is fraudulent. And that doesn't lead you to want to participate in voting in it. I studied the late 60s, early 70s in detail, and it produced that consistently. As the Weather Underground went up, younger voting went down. I mean, it was just not a course. Because if you think about it, the whole idea of its existence is that the system is a fraud. Why would you partake and justify the fraud? You're going to go out for Joe Biden? You're going to go out and if you're BLM, that motivates you?
But Robert, traditionally though, younger voters have been irrelevant to the electorate, right? It's always been the older voters who cast the votes and who make noise. That's why younger voters are usually it's funny because in politics they call them the irrelevant, unfortunately. Right? The younger the vote, the more relevant they are because they're less likely they are to cast their ballot.
Yeah.
And I think
it's even worse this cycle. It's gonna hit the lowest level since 2000.
Now I do think I think the protest has put more people into let's say if it's true, the protest does or BLM is generating more votes. Let's take the opposite approach. I don't think it's going to help Joe Biden's cause by any means, because
No.
those places are usually liberal strongholds anyway, right? New York City, California, places like that. That's where you're seeing all the protesting, and they're already Democrat strongholds anyway. If you started seeing those things in those real ruby red states, then you could maybe make the argument. But I don't think BLM is going to have any real impact on the amount of vote share that African Americans get. And
could it actually backfire because some of the people will be afraid to go out?
Well, I think so, but there's one thing I do want to say. MSNBC, I know that's a bad word here. MSNBC did a wonderful story on black voters in Georgia, because everybody's saying that Joe Biden's close, and they did a fascinating piece on black voters. So they went and they assumed that these black women were all going to be voting for Biden, right? So they went and did this piece. MSNBC, they did this piece on black voters in Georgia, and these black women told MSNBC that they were undecided. They may vote for Trump, and they were shocked. They were like, "Why would you vote for Trump?" And they were like, "Because Biden wrote the damn crime bill." They were like, "What are you talking about? And Biden wrote the crime bill. You think he can fool us?" And all of these people were saying, when it comes to taxes, when it comes to my pocket, think about it. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and the world didn't end. The stock market's still going. He said, maybe up north, you guys can just think all that stuff doesn't mean anything, but down here, my 401k still all right. And we're in the middle of a global pandemic. Like, there's something Trump is doing right. It just can't be ignored. My pockets are still good, even though people are hurting. Think about it. Our pockets are still good. The stock market didn't fall off a cliff. And we're in the middle of the worst pandemic in the human history. So that's what, and I think that was
the worst reaction to, that's a hard one. It's the worst reaction to a pandemic in history, because we've shut everything down. I would say that the Spanish flu technically had higher numbers of.
Oh yeah, it was.
Yeah.
So I want to definitely get some of these in too.
Yeah.
This is for everybody. I don't know exactly what Peter Bemis is talking about, but do you think a Democratic Congress / executive judiciary will withhold funding from states to force them to pass the national popular vote interstate compact?
So that's an attempt to change the Constitution to scrap the Electoral College and shift to whoever wins a popular vote. And they're arguing about the way in which Congress. It's an intriguing idea. It's frightening to me. Some of the sort of a revolutionary, scripting of power. So technically, the federal government has the power to limit, use its the carrot of federal funding to try to coerce behavior. Now, in most of the sanctuary city suits, that federal power, the courts have said you can't use in the manner in which it's being used. It's an open question whether or not using it in such a way. Could they say, we will not allow federal funding to go to your state unless your state approves this constitutional amendment? Probably not. I don't think they can use it in that way. It's usually supposed to be a correlation to whatever the federal policy is. So the short answer is, but I mean, it's amazing to me that even someone came up with this idea, because it's the first time they've ever come up with this idea, to my knowledge. I mean, the idea of, hey, you know what, we could limit, and it's just that the mindset of the professional class left is, let's look at every tool of power. It reminds me of the statists, who are
rather than a vote, you mean?
Yeah,
work in the system rather than work in the voter.
Well, in other words, they look at everything. They say, hey, let's look at every tool of power we have in the whole world. How can we weaponize it for politicized purposes? How can we weaponize it for political gain? And it's the way communists looked at the world. And it's amazing to see its recandescence, its resuscitance, because it really died in the States by the 1950s, 1960s, because sort of communism discredited that mechanism of seeing the world. But it's now back at every level. I mean, it's why you have human resources departments doing what they're doing, and the judiciary doing what and it's very much an end justify the means approach.
Gerrymandering. Pick your voters. Don't let the voters pick you. You pick your voters.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what really, like, behind the scenes, what the issue of immigration is. If immigrants coming in were equal Democrat or Republican, then you would have an economic and political argument about immigration. We'd probably agree to some sort of limits. Because it overwhelmingly favors one party over the other, it becomes a power issue. So,
but don't forget Bush too. Second, 2004. Bush, with his immigration policy, that's why he won that second election so big, because of the Hispanic vote. Hispanics voted for Bush in mass because he wanted to do immigration reform, and I think the Republicans lost that with Obama. I don't know why they lost that, but remember, Hispanics were actually trending toward Republicans. It was going to be a break. It was that critical mass.
Bush was a Texas governor, spoke Spanish, got on very well with the Mexican community as a whole. I mean, he really did understand them and communicated very well with them. And David, you were saying something a minute ago.
Oh no, don't worry. No, I was going to say I noticed how the tendency to not game the system, but I had never heard of packing the courts in my 4 years of being aware of American politics. Only after playing the rules didn't work out, keeping Ginsburg on the bench, or Ginsburg staying on the bench for too long, then passing at a time which was good for Republicans, does it come up? It's like you from an outsider's perspective, you see people playing by the rules, which were the generally accepted rules, and then when it doesn't work out, we're going to pack the courts now because we don't like the way it played out, given the decisions we made not to have Ginsburg retire when we could have. And so, I mean, we see it sort of playing out in real time. Who's abolishing the Electoral College because they won the popular vote? It's a weird thing, because if they lose the popular vote now for whatever the fluke, the discussion will end. Like, then you want to keep the Electoral College. But it is a question of just defying the generally accepted rules, the historical customs, when it doesn't pay off given the gambits you've made.
But let's not forget, though, there's only been 3 times the person who's lost the popular vote won the presidency. So this is not a trend. This is.
I thought it happened a couple more times in the 1800s.
So it happened once. I think once in the 1800s. Bush won with him and Gore, and then the last one was Clinton. So it happened 3 times. There's only been three occurrences.
Yep. Okay. And I think the other mistake Democrats are making is the reason the popular vote is what it is because there's disparate interest in targeting certain areas. Like if the popular vote determined the election, Trump would run an entirely different campaign. He would campaign heavily in New York and in rural areas throughout in the West. He would in California, just because there's more votes there. And there would be a much higher, heavier turnout in a bunch of places. So the assumption that the popular vote would translate into something, it would be an entirely different election. So I think it's a mistake to go down that path. It definitely will kill small towns politically, because all of a sudden they'll have no juice. Nobody will care about New Hampshire anymore. No one will care about Iowa anymore, really, because just the vote counting, the way it goes. So it would all be big media markets. You would just go New York, Chicago, Dallas, Miami, LA, San Francisco, Seattle, boom, boom, boom. But it would change in ways I think a lot of people would not anticipate. So I think that's where hopefully none of that will take place. Once 170 votes,
that's a follow-up of that. It's getting the state laws to go.
What he means is that if enough states pass the law, you don't need a constitutional amendment to achieve it. That's true. In other words, if enough states, because who picks the electors is delegated to the states. So if they choose to pass a law that says we'll pick now there's still constitutional questions about that, though.
One man, one vote.
Yeah, there's that, and there's can you defer? I have the same problem in my view in tax law. California piggybacks off of federal law. There's a problem when your state tax law is based on what some congressman in Arkansas wanted passed at the federal level. At some level, you really haven't passed a law when you're borrowing somebody else's law that's always changing. There's a problem from that internally. They're not going to deal with it in the tax context because of the problems it creates. It's bothering me. That's funny. One of them. It's funny what people pay attention to. They pay attention to the craziest thing.
The one light.
It's an LED light, and that's a whole stupid system that was installed in the basement. But Robert, here, I noticed someone else said the same chat, and I was thinking this: if you pack the courts, and then people are going to say, "Well, when Republicans come back into power, when Republicans come back into power, they're going to pack the courts." I think the idea is that once you do something that creates an irreversible political tipping point, pack the courts, Republicans will never win another election again to pack it themselves with their own. But then in the long term, like what happens? It's not that the fighting is going to stop if the Democrats maintain power. They're going to start fighting within themselves, and then there's going to be like a faction within a faction of the party.
Well, and it's how countries fail. People forget we're pretty old for a democracy. So, 200 plus years, there's not a lot of examples of 500 plus years or even 300 plus years of these kind of constitutional democracies. So that would be the Paul Kennedy argument back in the day is to these kind of debates actually being taken seriously would be seen by some political scientists and historians as evidence of a declining society.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've definitely run over. I know there's a couple hard outs. So what is anybody have a final message that they want to get out?
I had one message. No, I'm sure Robert, you go with yours because I know what yours is going to be, and it'll give me time to think of mine.
I actually didn't have one, but I would say
3 eternal truths.
oh yes, the 2 eternal truths. Epstein did not kill himself, and Sally Yates is corrupt. And for those wondering, yes, I'll be betting on Trump. We'll see if I'm right.
You know what? You should just have a shirt that's printed that just says 3 eternal truths and nothing else. Viva Barnes and 3 eternal truths. And then anybody who knows will be in the know.
Oh my
god. It's like a code thing. But that would be freaking awesome.
I know what I'm doing tonight. After I finish the video, I've got to do.
That would be send one my way for the finder fee.
That's a very good idea. I see a lot of people thinking that it is there was a movie, Le Déclin de l'Empire Américain. It was the decline of the decline of the American Empire. It was a French movie. I think it was French from France, but it might have been French from Quebec. I don't know what it had to do with the decline of the American Empire, but from an outside perspective, I see Tim Pool talking about
Rolleclair or whatever his name was. I forgot his name.
Yeah, it was a good movie once upon a time. But I see some people panicking, talking about utter chaos. I think one way or another, it's gonna settle down after the election. And maybe I've been spending too much time with Barnes. I think the pundits are all going to be wrong this year again. I think there's a large minority of a silent. I don't even say a silent majority. There's a ton of people who are too embarrassed to say what they think, but who all have the same sentiment. And having watched Tim Pool's transition from anti-Trump, anti-Second Amendment, and I've been watching him for a couple of years now.
He's doing the Dave Rubin. He's just slower.
Yeah, he's doing Dave Rubin.
He was stubborn, and he was stubborn and vehement a year and a half ago. He's got public shame to go with his public transition. There's a lot of other people who are making this transition very privately and very quickly. That's my sentiment.
Well, you know what? One thing, my last thing is, we get 1,500 people watching. How can you not subscribe to this channel? Come on, guys.
There you go.
It takes nothing to hit the button. It literally takes nothing. Just hit the button. Come on. You guys have enjoyed this. You've enjoyed us all talking about this madness that's going on. So please subscribe to Eric's channel. Just hit the button. It costs nothing, right? Viva Barnes.
Hero.
You guys also, support this motion.
It costs nothing. Run the videos and let the ads play through from beginning to end.
Yeah, and
let's see if we can just get you at least a $5 grand. We got 1,500 people. Press the button, people. What's wrong with you? Come on.
Eric introduced me to a wide range of fascinating people. So that's my endorsement. I mean, the behavior panel guys, those guys are genius. So I was telling them that they should organize like a jury consulting opera, because I would hire them. I would have hired them in the past had I known of their existence.
They're all available. I know Chase does jury consultations. Scott Rouse, don't count him out. Scott's a very wily one.
All 4 of them are brilliant. I was like,
great.
Because I was the idea.
Dr. Phil today, by the way, and tomorrow.
Oh, fascinating! That would be intriguing. They're really just taking off, but their analysis is different level. I mean, it's just a whole different. And I learned a lot from when I was reviewing the debates. I watched it on mute.
Bowden's great for that too, because Bowden trains the people debating. I've had Simon Lancaster on as well, and Simon Lancaster worked with Bowden. Lancaster writes speeches, and I'm going to try to bring him on for a live stream too. I'd love to bring him and Bowden on, because he's the speech guy and Bowden's the body guy, and literally will package a candidate, and they're the two devils whispering in the ear.
Well, Eric, I got an idea for you. I would love to do a face analysis with one of the facial analysis people who've been on your channel with
Susan,
me.
She'll come on anytime.
And we do a competition to see who can read better of a face. And I was thinking I can give anyone a run for their money, but maybe that's just my inflated ego.
Listen, I unfortunately I have to run because it's 7:15 here, and I got kids that are going to kill me if I don't at least get the dinner on the table. But listen, thank you guys so much for having me.
Thank you.
So fun. It's always a pleasure talking to mountains because I feel like I'm a lawyer, but I feel like I learned so much from Barnes. I'm like, damn, I need to go back to school because this guy's like a wealth of information. And Viva's my brother from another mother. So listen,
when the borders open up, we all have drinks together one day.
We got to do that. Even before the border opens up, we may be running to Canada. But I will say
there you go.
Thank you guys for just such a fascinating conversation. Thank you guys all in the chat. Please don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Eric is doing an amazing job. And listen, guys, don't forget Sunday with Viva and Barnes. I'll be in the chat watching these guys murder whatever happens.
Sunday's going to be a good one.
Yeah, Sunday's going to be a great one. But listen, everybody, take care. God bless, and I'll see you guys soon.
Have a good night. I'm out also. Let's do it.
Thank you, everybody. All right.
An hour 45. Okay, we're still going. I still see the time.